Hi everyone, my name is Lillian and I'm currently an exchange student at the National University of Singapore. Whenever I tell people I'm doing exchange in Singapore, they always ask me, why did you choose Singapore? And yeah, it's a really good question, so I thought I would answer that today and also talk about why I chose Singapore over other locations like Europe and other places in Asia like Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, and China. I'll also talk about the reality versus expectations of studying abroad in Singapore, so like whether or not the reasons I just told you were valid or not. Basically, the main reason why I wanted to study abroad in Singapore was that I just thought Singapore was really cool. I had a very positive first impression of Singapore from social media, like seeing pictures of Marina Bay Sands, Gardens by the Bay, and like other places like Chinatown, Little India. I was like, wow, Singapore is such a cool, cultural, modern place that I always wanted to visit. And after high school, I really wanted to visit Singapore and do like a Southeast Asia trip, but it didn't happen because of COVID. So Singapore was always on my like dream bucket list destination. I also learned more about Singapore and I was like very intrigued by its history and government. I think I was very interested in how Singapore developed really quickly economically, and also its government is very different from the United States government. I feel like is very efficient and authoritarian, but seems to be working out very well. So I kind of wanted to study abroad in Singapore to learn more about like Singapore's history and what it would be like to live under a different government system. Also, my friends studied abroad here and loved it. They all had great things to say about it. Shout out Real Hill for this because he told me a lot about his experience in Singapore and had amazing things to say. And I know you're probably watching this, so thank you for being a pretty big factor in me choosing to study abroad here. I also want to study abroad in Asia to feel closer to like my cultural identity. As an Asian American, being in America, I don't feel super American sometimes because like the typical American is like white. So I wanted to see if I'd feel more Asian if I studied abroad in Asia. Yeah, and then some other like minor pros of why I decided to study abroad in Singapore was the fact that Singapore is a very modern city. I just wanted to experience what it'd be like to live in like very like modern and efficient city with good public transit. Also, everyone here speaks English, so I feel like it's easier to kind of connect with people and have like insightful conversations with them because I knew that if I studied abroad in another country, like Japan, for example, where pretty much everyone speaks Japanese, I would obviously learn Japanese, but my Japanese wouldn't be good enough for me to have like a deep conversation with someone because I'm not really that good at learning languages. But I know that like in English, I can have a pretty deep combo with someone. And also, Singapore is good to other countries in Southeast Asia. So it would be good for traveling and good for exploring Asia, which I haven't really traveled too much. And now I'm going to talk about why I decided not to go to Europe. So I know that Europe is a very, very popular study abroad destination for a lot of Americans. And honestly, it seems like a ton of fun. I see my friends studying abroad in Europe right now, and they seem like they're having a really great time. Like, I feel like if you go to Europe, you'll definitely have a good time. But I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone a bit more because I've been to Europe before on like vacation, and I just wanted to try something a little bit more different. I haven't really been to Asia too much before, only a few times in my life, and back when I was pretty young. And also, since there are a lot of Americans studying abroad in Europe, and a lot of people I know are studying abroad in Europe, I felt like I would see a lot of people I knew in Europe and would kind of interact with like the same Americans that I would back home. So I wanted to push myself more out of like an American bubble and meet more people from like different perspectives and cultures. And yeah, like I just mentioned before, I wanted to go to Asia to feel closer to like my cultural identity as an Asian American, and you can't really get that in Europe. And now I'll talk about why I decided to choose to study abroad in Singapore versus other places in Asia. So honestly, the program dates were much better than like Japan and Korea. I think they started pretty late and ended a bit late, so it just aligned better for like a summer internship. And yeah, Singapore was also like the one place in Asia that wanted to visit the most. Like my heart was kind of set on Singapore because it's always been like my dream travel destination. Yeah, other places in Asia look like a lot of fun to study abroad too. Like I know someone who studied abroad in Hong Kong and she had a great time. Yeah, I don't know. My heart was just like set on Singapore. I was like, wow, Singapore is so cool. I want to go here. Yeah, now I'm going to talk about some reality versus expectations of studying abroad in Singapore. I don't know why, but I thought that from seeing like Gardens by the Bay and all this other like green architecture in Singapore, I thought Singapore would be very like have a lot of nature. But I was so wrong about that. I feel like the nature in Singapore, it's here, but it feels very like artificial and manufactured. So definitely very different from California and like Bay Area nature. I'll go to the ocean and I'll just see like a bunch of shipping containers out there. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind if you like really, really love nature. Another thing is that it's so hot in Singapore that I like barely want to go outside. So I like barely want to like hike or like do anything adventurous. Another reality versus expectation I had was like public transit in Singapore being like very modern and efficient. This might be a hot take, but I don't like Singapore's public transit that much. I think especially coming from NUS, it's not like the best situated school for public transit. I mean, it's a lot better than other schools like NTU, but like I wanted to go to this park and it took an hour by public transit and 10 minutes by car. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, why is this difference so big? And I feel like most places in Singapore from public transit will take 2 to 3 times longer than driving a car. And I just look at that and like, are you kidding me? Like, Singapore is a small place, so it won't take you like more than an hour and a half to get anywhere. But it's still like, why is this taking so long? And it'll be so much faster by car. So that's kind of annoying to see. And I think another like reality versus expectation was the heat. Like I knew that Singapore would be hot, but I didn't know that it would be so hot and like affect my life so much, which sounds a bit dramatic, but like, I got like a heat rash when I first came here. Like I can't go outside in the afternoon without like sweating after like 5 minutes. Like I feel so honestly, like if you don't like the heat at all, if you can't stand the heat at all, I would recommend not sitting around Singapore. But you know, at the end of the day, it's just like you can get climatized. Like I got climatized, so like you'll be fine. I'll talk about like whether or not I regret sitting around in Singapore, and the answer is no. I think that Singapore is an amazing place to be. I think I've learned a lot about like the culture and life in Singapore so far. I also really like dorm life in NUS. Really like staying in the dorm, and I think there's a lot of like dorm activities, so it's pretty nice to meet a lot of exchangers and locals. And I say that being in Southeast Asia has pushed me out of my comfort zone for sure, and I've liked how Singapore is very like easy place to travel to a lot of different countries in Southeast Asia. I feel like more secure with my culture identity as an Asian American after studying abroad here. And yeah, if you're thinking of studying abroad in Singapore, I definitely recommend it. But yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to comment them below and I'll answer them. But I hope that this gives you more insight if you're considering studying abroad in Singapore, or if you're just curious about why I decided to study abroad in Singapore. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching.